Hey everybody, welcome back to Autopilot On Podcast. I'm Scott and Connor's here co-hosting with me today. It's going to be the Christmas special. We got our ugly Christmas sweaters on and John might jump in. He just moved into his new house a couple days ago and him and his wife, they're unpacking. Their life is crazy right now. So hopefully we'll get him, but no guarantees. How you doing, Connor?
Doing good, man. Merry Christmas, you filthy animals.
Yeah.
We are today is the 19th, so we're 6 days out from Christmas, and here in Texas it is 70 degrees outside. Doesn't feel much like Christmas up here, but we're still gonna celebrate, baby.
There you go. I mean, what is normal Christmas in Texas? That's the reason you moved there, right? 70 barbecue.
Up and down, you
Yeah.
never know, man. You never do know. Yeah, on Christmas Day it's gonna be 76. So
Ooh.
yeah, we are gonna be barbecuing out for Christmas. Only in Texas, man, but that's why you moved there.
That's exactly right.
Your
Awesome,
sweater
man.
looks great, by the way.
What was that?
Your sweater looks great, by the
Well,
way.
thanks. Yeah, got Nakatomi Plaza for all the older people that get it. So, yeah,
Love
man.
that.
I love the hat, by the way. I thought about getting one and I should have. So, maybe I'll get one for my trip this week.
Well, Santa Claus left it down the chimney last year, so
There you
I decided to steal it. Probably on the naughty list.
That's awesome. Right on, man. Well, we got a lot to talk about today. I'm gonna try to get this edited out a few days early just to so it's more current. But man, there's so much going on. It's too bad John's not here because he's gonna miss out on all the updates. Um, so I know you had a bunch of stuff written down. So where do you want to start?
Well, so I'll just follow up from the last time that I spoke with you on 2 episodes ago. We're up to 142 fatal accidents on the year. That is 12 more than the last time that I last spoke with you. We're averaging 12.23 fatal accidents per month. It's still trending down as of 2019 on the website that I'm getting all this information. Started keeping track on 2019, so it still is trending down. Um, Everybody be careful out there. It's winter time, as we just discussed. Be cautious of the ice. And do a good pre-flight as we've discussed previously. I want to
Do,
tie that into a pretty. Go ahead.
does that include the crash in North Carolina that just happened this week?
I was just
Because
gonna
that,
say
yeah,
I want to tie this in. This
okay.
includes this. There's we're 353 days in on 2025, and yeah, I was gonna tie it right on into the pretty high profile accident. November 257 Bravo Whiskey, a citation 550. Um, 2 crew and 6 passengers departed out of North Carolina, filed to Sarasota, Florida. This was yesterday on 12-18. They were on an IFR flight plan, filed at 32,000 feet. Right after takeoff, uh, backtrack. They're going North Carolina to Sarasota, Florida, so they're at max takeoff weight based on how far they're going. They're on a citation 550. Uh, they're right up against max takeoff weight would be my guess, based on the fuel required and the trip length. They're filed at 32,000 feet. Well, they took off runway 10. And according to what I've read, the pilot reported an engine malfunction. Now, if that was an engine fire or an engine failure or whatever that might be, we just don't know yet.
Mhm.
After that was reported, the aircraft began a series of rapid climbs and rapid descents. Airspeed obviously fluctuating in between that as well. At that point, it appears, according to the ADSB data, that they attempted to fly back to the airport. I do want to remind everybody there was some weather in the area. Nothing really convective, it didn't look like, just some fog and low clouds, low ceiling, things like that. As they're sorting out this issue, they're on their way back to the airport, and they do a really tight downwind to the approaching runway. They follow that up by a really tight turn to base, and they struck the ground at full configuration, according to witnesses, gear down, full flaps, at about 95 knots ground speed. Went through a golf course, skidded through a road, and it appears they were about zero point 0.3 miles from the airport, and it resulted in multiple fatalities, including a high profile former NASCAR driver, Mr. Biffle, and his family. You can see the aircraft there. It is rated for single pilot. Um, I did read that there was a crew on it. It was owned by Mr. Biffle, and you just hate to see that. So with the 142 fatal accidents, this is the latest one. It happened yesterday, and man, we're losing too many good ones. Our hearts go out to them. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, it's terrible. It's all too common, unfortunately, and in the corporate world, in the private jet and GA world, unfortunately, it's obviously higher rates of accidents and fatalities than in the airline world. Um, and that it always makes me wonder. I mean, what do you think the reasoning is behind that? Do you think it's training, regulation, standards? Why do you think, we'll just put small GA pistons and stuff aside because, that's pretty obvious. That is people working on their own airplanes trying to save money. That's a common, VFR into IMC. Those are the big killers in that. But, it's always in the corporate world, in the 135 and 91 private jet and turbine world, there's always obviously a lot more fatal crashes than in the 121 world. So why do you think that is?
Well, you know, one of the glaring issues that I can just kind of see, and most of these accidents are not mechanical induced. They're typically human error. Now, in the 121 world, your maintenance is so tight. I mean, anything that's happening, you're going to ride it up, and you're going to have maintenance there. Within the next 3 hours, maybe to
Mm,
fix the issue.
mhm,
Going on to the 135 and 91 side of things, the maintenance is normally contracted out, or you have to fly the airplane to maintenance. So there's a maintenance side of it that now these airplanes are really well maintained. There's no doubt about it. But the maintenance in the 121 world, I think, is a little bit tighter. Um, I think you're seeing it in the airline world too, where you have a really experienced captain and a good, well seasoned first officer, but, this airplane was single pilot. He might have just had, somebody just in the right seat to
mhm,
ride along with them. Maybe a
sure.
young SIC, old SIC, whoever that didn't have just a ton of experience, or maybe he was just being more of a distracting factor than actually helping solve the problem.
Could be.
You really in the 121 world, you really have two trained professionals. Um, that learned the exact same way, went through the exact same curriculum. Whereas whenever you start getting into the 91 and 135 world, you have one guy might have went to one training school, the other one might have went to the other training school, and maybe they didn't quite get the exact same training that you would do if you're at a 121, either mainline, regional airline, whatever it might be. Everybody's taught the exact same way. Um, you know, it is interesting to answer your question. I don't know if I can really answer that question.
Hmm,
What the big difference is on it. I mean, nobody. It's a risk every time you take the airplane into the air. Everybody wants to go home.
right.
Um, but it's there's just so many factors that go into it. We could go all day on that.
Yeah. No, I was just curious. That it's terrible and we're it's good that we're seeing it trend down over the years, and I hope it continues and even accelerates in the trending down direction. Uh it's tough on the GA side to get it down just because there's so many different factors and unknowns and people flying in uncontrolled areas with a lot more varying airports, small airports, weather, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I mean, who knows when the last time the pilot had flown IFR. I mean,
Mm,
there's just really not a lot known about this accident. It only happened yesterday.
right.
Um, but it just, you really feel every time it seems like we're opening up our phones and there's just always something going on. Whether it's, the DC crash, whether it's this crash, I was reading a bunch of, smaller GA, like 182s and Moonies. I was reading one the other day where they were on the takeoff roll and the pilot didn't reset his trim and it was at full aft. So whenever he took off, it just pitched right up and he couldn't catch it in time and he stalled out, rolled over, and crashed. I mean, it's just the little things that we really have to be careful of. And, it just makes you realize, it just makes you question, if you have an engine failure, like it sounds like this crew did, maybe they're so ate up with fighting that failure or trying to decide what they're going to do that they forgot to fly the airplane. I'm not speculating, but it's almost kind of what it seems like with all the altitude and airspeed fluctuations. It's aviate, navigate, communicate. Fly the airplane first. These airplanes can fly on one engine. We know that.
Yep.
Um, you know, and
Well, but that brings up a good point. We in the airline world, and even you in the 135 world, like you're in the sim, every 6 months, running that procedure multiple times, and you're current. In the Part 91 world, um, is it? I believe been out so long. I think it's just annual requirement, right? Um, for
yeah, for the most part,
unless insurance requires it for every 6 months. So there, you're not as current. I mean, and so if you do have man, I mean, a V1 cut is a handful, and 99% of the time when it happens, it's not at V1 like we train. It's a few seconds after or before, or in their case, it could have been a partial engine failure, which then you have to think about it for a second. And if you're single pilot, if you just have a seat filler, then you don't have somebody to handle everything else while you focus on flying. So that I think that's a big factor in this stuff too, is the currency and frequency we train has a big effect on the outcome.
what? Yeah, and one thing, guys or girls that are listening to this, if you have, whenever next time you're at recurrent, initial, whatever, if next time you're in the simulator training, there's any extra time, just like what you said, Scott, I would advise you. We always are geared at V1 cuts where the engine fails right at rotation speed, right at V1,
Mhm.
or right at V1 or rotation speed. I started asking my sim evaluator after whenever we had some extra time if he'd give me an engine failure at 1,000 feet in the climb, and that
Mhm.
airplane reacts so much different than it does at a slower airspeed at V1 or rotation speed. So it might be something to think about because more than likely, I mean, who knows when it's going to happen, but you want to see different phases of flight with different emergencies, just to prepare yourself for events like this. And again, this happened yesterday. Nobody really knows much about it
Right.
yet. We can
Right.
just
We're not
analyze.
speculating on that crash. We're just talking generalities here.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, that was something at the airline world that when I went through initial on the Airbus, they gave us engine failures in flight at different stages, which was, because I mean, I spent 7 or 8 years in the 135 and 91 world. In the sims, they never gave us that stuff in those airplanes, and so it was a totally different experience. So these are, like Connor said, like the number one thing when they have extra time, people are like, no, no, I want to go home and get out of here. It's like, use that time, man. You're paying for it already. So utilize it. Have them give you something that you've never seen before. Yeah, hopefully you'll get ideas from listening to this show and others on things you want to try out in the sim that you never want to actually do in the airplane. Just so if it ever happens, you're ready.
Yeah, and on this podcast, we talk about a broad variety of things across the aviation world. But if we can save lives by bringing up some certain points, then that's kind of what I really try to do on this show. Is I want to save lives. That's why I'm always talking about the fatalities. That's why I'm always bringing up certain key events that have happened so we can learn from them. And I've said it so many times on this show, but the regulations and lessons are written in blood in aviation. It's just a fact. And if you're not really paying attention to the fatalities and the crashes and things like that, and you're in the aviation world, I really advise that you should take some time out to read and learn from people's mistakes. You don't have to learn it the hard way yourself.
Right.
And that might come across as harsh, but that's just what I believe in.
No, that's how it should be, man. I mean, you got It's not harsh, it's just reality. Letting people know, hey, we don't live in la la land. When we make mistakes, bad things happen and people can die. And so, uh, a lot of the times I might be seen as too serious, but it's like, I've had friends die in plane crashes. I've had friends have, engine failures and having to nurse airplanes back to the ground. I've had emergencies. I haven't had an engine failure, knock on wood, but it could happen. And we don't get paid, like I've said before, we don't get paid to sit there and cruise with the autopilot on. We get paid when those critical minutes when something goes really bad and we have to, you know, handle it and save lives and get the airplane on the ground.
It's
So
well said.
yeah,
Couldn't have
I'll
said it
just
better
get
myself.
off that. Yep. Yeah. So anyways, let's move on to the next topic, man. Frontier made a really big announcement this week. They decided to replace the CEO of Frontier Airlines. Barry Biffle had been the CEO 10 or 11 years at Frontier. I believe he was on a contract extension for a couple years, and just suddenly on Monday they made the announcement that they had replaced Barry Biffle with for interim CEO. They put Jimmy Dempsey, who's been the president of Frontier. So he was number 2, and they moved him up to number 1 to take over the company. And so, it just happened this week, so not a lot else has been said. So we'll wait to see what's going to happen now that this change has been made. I have my thoughts. I'll let you make some thoughts, Connor, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, so Barry Biffle out and James Dempsey in. We got some new blood running the Frontier Airlines company. The Frontier shares rose more than 9% after that move was made, on the heels of a potential merger with Spirit Airlines. Now we've been talking about this since 2022. That was with Barry Biffle at the helm.
Yep.
And you got to be careful and cautious about a full acquisition of Spirit, because you absorb all their debt, you absorb all their issues. But with the big major U.S. airlines now able to match the ULCC's ticket costs, and they have a ton more airplanes where they can really fill in those key routes with more aircraft. Um, it seems like for these ULCCs, you're going to have to merge and create a big reckoning force. That's what Frontier and Spirit have been trying to do since 2022. Blue obviously came in and gave Spirit a better offer. We all know that didn't go through the way most people thought it would be, thanks to a judge up in New York. But yeah, there's that's going on, and it's an exciting time for the ULCC market. It'll be interesting to see what Mr. James Dempsey is going to do with his first move as head of the company. I mean, I did read where he was on an interim CEO extension. I don't think they've announced him as the permanent one. I'm sure they want to see kind of what he's going to do, and give him the ropes for 6 months to a year. If it's a good fit, they'll probably keep him in. If
Good
not,
point.
we've seen it happen so much. They'll go shop around and find somebody else and plug and play him.
Yep.
Um, Again, I'm a little bit disconnected from that side of flying,
Sure.
but I got all that on the internet, and I'll be interested to kind of hear kind of what you think the big difference between Mr. James Dempsey uh, is going to bring to the table versus what Barry Biffle couldn't.
Well, you know, our listeners, our loyal listeners who've been with us for, almost a year now, we've covered the Spirit and Frontier thing pretty in depth. So, several months ago, Spirit pulled Ted Christie out and replaced him with Dave Davis. And Doug Parker had said on another podcast that, they did this to close the deal. And so after thinking about this for a couple days, my thoughts are, the talks between Spirit and Frontier had really seemed to have stalled out, at least in the public eye. Who knows what was going on behind the scenes? But in the last few times Barry had talked about it, he denied M&A. He wouldn't talk about it in the earnings calls and in the public eye. And so I'm wondering if this is a similar move that the Spirit board made, where they said, if we need to put a new face up there who wants to move the industry forward through consolidation. And I'm wondering if Barry was against that and Jimmy is on board with that, and they're swapping him out to close the deal. Because the day after the change was announced, all of a sudden the internet is aflurry with suspicions of a Frontier Spirit merger. So that leads me to believe that logically that's the conclusion to come to on that, or the suspicion. It's going to be interesting because Dempsey has been essentially number 2 at Frontier for many years now. So there is kind of he's been part of the management team. Putting him as number 1, is that going to make a big difference? So that remains to be seen. But like you said, and I've been saying, I personally think it would be irresponsible for Indigo to merge Frontier and Spirit. It has to be a 363 sale where they can shed the debt and they're not required to take on all the debt and labor and everything. And just from a business standpoint, if they decide to do a straight merger, they have to take everything in the bankruptcy with them. And
Yeah.
Indigo has always been against carrying debt load. So that just doesn't make sense to me.
And I think if you really want to get down to soups and nuts on it, that's probably why. That's the big red light in this whole deal. Because I was reading, earlier this year, Spirit rejected at least 2 merger proposals from Frontier, and one of
Mm,
them was valued at $2.16 billion.
yeah.
$2.16 billion offer. So I'm wondering, is that price going to go up, or is it going to go down, or is it going to stay the same? I can't really see that increasing. So now, if you're Spirit, now every time you say no, the price is going to keep getting lower and lower
Mm-hmm.
and lower. And it's been that way since the start of 2022, whenever this whole merger acquisition talk started coming into place. I read that a deal could be announced as soon as this month. Probably they're talking about January. But at the end of the day, both sides have to agree on a good deal. And I'm sure that Spirit, this is all of Spirit shareholders that are driving a lot of this. Yes or no, I would have to think. Um,
Probably speculation. Yeah.
that's just me, shooting off the hip and,
Sure.
trying to dive into these CEOs' mindsets. But, you mentioned that, James Dempsey was number 2 at Frontier, and he's been part of that management. But at the end of the day, I mean, he's not the ultimate decision maker. Now that
Right.
he's the ultimate decision maker, he could pull that cord. And I'm just thinking about all these furloughs that have happened at Spirit. They now furloughed, I think, close to 1,800 flight attendants. What would this mean? Do you think both pilot groups would want something like this, or do you think, like, obviously Spirit, they need something to happen, or else they could just liquidate and everybody's on the
Yep.
street. Whereas
Yep.
these Frontier pilots are over here saying, "Man, do I really want to integrate this seniority list
SLI.
into my stance?" So there's just so many factors that run through this. Um, I mean, we're going on year 4 of this now, and it's either going to happen or it's not.
Right.
But if something doesn't happen fast, I mean, Spirit is they're just in a bad way right now. They can't really do this too much longer. So I think desperate times are going to call for desperate measures, and I think I don't know if they're going to merge or if they're going to liquidate or sell all their airplanes off. Because they don't own all their airplanes. Obviously, I saw where they deferred 80 leases going into this year. So I mean, they're obviously downsizing. They've cut costs. They've cut pilot costs. They've cut pilots. They've cut flight attendants. At what point are we just going to throw in the towel and say, okay, this was a good ride. Wish it would have lasted longer. Or, hey, let's just penny it up with Frontier and just see what happens. Let's give these big airlines a run for their money. I just don't know if the government's going to come in and block it again like they did last time. I mean, we saw what happened with Hawaiian and Alaskan right after the failed merger with JetBlue and Spirit happened. They axed JetBlue and Spirit, and then they allowed Hawaiian and Alaskan to merge. Now, I'm sure I'm not a lawyer. I'm sure it was quite a difference in what everybody was asking for there, but it's just going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen with this new blood running the Frontier company, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Hopefully, we'll definitely get some answers here in the next couple of weeks, I think. It'll either happen in the next week before the holiday or, probably sometime in January. It's it we were talking about it last week about the numbers on Spirit, and they don't have much more liquidity left to run. They're running on fumes financially, and they just keep getting these little disbursements on their DIP just to string them along a little longer. And because they keep getting smaller, it makes me think one of two things. Either the investors who are giving them the money think that the deals are getting close, and so they're only giving them a little bit to make it through the deal, or the other side would be that they're like, well, we're not going to keep giving you money if this isn't going anywhere. So we'll just trickle it off, and then what happens happens.
Yeah, I mean, because these investors that are funding this Spirit experiment, I mean, these aren't dumb people. These are smart
Right.
people. I read where they got $100 million at the beginning of this month, or a couple weeks ago, sometime in December, and that might seem like a lot of money, but an airline will suck up $100 million in like half a month to maybe two
Yeah.
weeks. You got to think about all the
Yeah.
fuel costs. You got to think about all the maintenance. I mean, can you just think? I've thought about this before. Just close your eyes and think about American Airlines or these massive airlines. Could be Internet, Lufthansa, whoever. Think about how much money they're spending in fuel every day. Think about all these costs that are on their payroll. I mean, these companies that they're bleeding money, but they're obviously making it back at the same time too. The demand's obviously there, and that's the crazy thing is, that the demand is there for the flying. People are flying at record numbers. I just read that Thanksgiving this year was the most busy that TSA has ever been in their entire existence. So
Yes.
people are out there flying. So why aren't people making money? I just don't understand. I really don't.
So it looks like 50 no, for all US airlines, it's about 100 to $130 million daily in fuel.
Think
So I
about
think that's all of them. So, you do quick math, or what are we talking about? Probably, I think it's the big 3 these numbers are going after, so that's, $40 million a day in fuel. I
day
mean,
and
a
fuel.
day. Yeah.
And that's not even,
So
that's not even maintenance. That's not even, doing your routine inspections. That's not even paying for labor. That's not even your pilot or flight attendant payroll. That's just
mhm.
like a very bottom fixed cost that people just,
Right.
easily overlook. And so yeah,
Right.
or $100 million sounds good, but that's not near enough because I think the first investors invested roughly 250 million. This next one was 100 million just a couple days ago, and I think I read somewhere in the fine print where they were only able to access 50 million of it, and the other
50, yeah.
50 would be able to be accessed whenever these demands are met.
Right.
So, I mean, at what point do you stop just, ringing the bell in front of the dog and just,
Yeah.
saying, "Hey," but to your point, it does sound like they know something that we don't, that there's some deals that are obviously in the pressure cooker, but that top's gonna bust off at some point.
Well, exactly, and it's getting closer. John and I joke about this all the time. It's like it's getting closer, and John gets frustrated that he's like, "I just wanna get an answer," and I'm like, "No, because then we'll have nothing to talk about."
Uh, this show needs to be labeled Autopilot On Spirit.
Yeah, that's right.
They've been giving us a
The
lot to
Spirit
talk about.
Saga. Oh, it's fun. This has been a great, um for our generation of airline pilots and GA now, but, like, it's been a great topic for us to explore, to really get educated on how the industry works, the history, ins and outs of what we do for a living, and how it how the bigger picture, affects the future of our career on a personal level.
That is so true, man. Whenever I signed up to join this 121 airline deal, I hear about all these furloughs. I'm like, that's bogus. That's just old timers talk, and that's not going to happen to me. And then all of a sudden, you
Never.
get directly affected by it, and all of a sudden, you like become extremely interested in it. And then because
Mhm.
you don't want to make, you want to maybe join another company or airline that's might be up against the same deal where you're constantly starting your career back and over and over and over. And man, it really is. I had no idea that I've learned so much on these past 3 years about the ins and outs of these aviation companies than I ever would have dreamed about in my entire
Right.
life. Because I mean, everybody tells you, the airline industry is up and down. It comes in waves. I didn't really know what that meant, but damn it, I do now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's extremely political, just like everything else. I mean, you have bigger airlines lobbying against smaller airlines, and then um, Delta slandering, or United,
Hmm. United
Scott Scurvy
Scott.
Kirby, whatever his name is, just slandering, Spirit to the point where it's like, dude, he thinks about Spirit a lot. He doesn't want Spirit to survive because then he has to keep on dropping his ticket prices to match it. He just wants Spirit to go away. He wants Frontier to go away. He wants to control that market, and
Right.
that's what I mean.
No,
Everybody
it's a
kind of
good point. See, this is
wants to
something
do
you
that,
brought
but
up that yeah, a lot of people don't understand what you just said. So in the last earning call for Frontier, Barry Biffle said this exact thing. He said, "We were finally starting to raise our ticket prices, and then Spirit cut all their prices, and we had to drop our prices back down. And now we're not profitable again." And it was it was like an eye-opening moment for me on it of like, "Oh, this is how this works." And you just highlighted why United and Delta don't like the ULCC models, because if 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 Frontier and Spirit and we'll say Southwest, because they used to be the lower cost carrier. So if those guys didn't exist, the legacies would never have basic economy. It would all be, your minimum ticket would be $500 probably for the worst ticket on a legacy airline. Um, and so you have a good point there.
yeah, I mean, I think you and I could probably start an airline after this, but it's funny
No
because
way, dude.
E
I'm out.
everybody, you have all these loyal flyers that are, flying the big 3, Southwest included, call it the big 4, and they're like, "I'm never gonna fly on Spirit. I'm never gonna fly on Frontier." Well, what they don't know is that they are benefiting from Spirit and Frontier and Avelo and Allegiant and whoever else you throw in there, um, because the airline you're flying is having to drive their tickets down to be somewhat competitive into bringing some flyers there. So you start seeing ULCCs tank, kind of like what you're seeing now. All of a sudden, Spirit goes away. Say Frontier goes away.
Yeah.
You said it. You're going to be pay $500 to fly on the back of the airplane by the toilet.
Yes.
Then what?
Well, and then they won't have to give as many perks, because that's a big thing that sets them apart from the low cost carriers is all the perks and the fancies. Well, if those tickets aren't around to compete with, then your $500 seat in the back, you're not going to get anything special with it. It's just going to be a seat. Just like John, I think, it was either John or Jose on the last episode. They were talking about how um, it's either Delta or United now is offering a ticket where it's like you can get just the seat upgrade, but you don't get so you'll get like a Comfort Plus seat or whatever they call it, but you're not going to get the snack box or the alcohol included. Like they're starting to create that other class of ticket fare now, and it's just they'll nickel and dime you wherever we can. Everybody accuses the ULCCs of nickel and diming, but the reality is that's what the legacies are doing too now.
Yeah.
They're giving you that option.
I'm telling you what, man, it's a crazy industry, and I think you brought the best point up. Is we've learned so much. I've learned so much in this whole process, just about how, not even necessarily the ins and outs of these how these companies run, but just kind of like getting a 5,000-foot perspective. Like, I'm not very smart, but even I can kind of see the way the ball is rolling. And
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you and I could start an airline tomorrow. We might do that.
I've been in management, dude. I'm good. I want to just fly and get paid. Oh
So it
man,
sounds like
it's
we were
it's
talking before we got on air. It sounds like you've been flying quite a bit, man.
oh
You're maxing out around 90 hours a month. Is that what you said?
yeah. Yeah, I'm bidding high credit just to try to pay off some of the debt I accumulated when I bought my house. And so, and it's because it's the holiday season, the way for people who don't know how the airline schedules work, um the majority of the flying in this time of year is clumped into usually the back half of the month. So like in November, for example, the first 2 weeks are pretty quiet. And then the last 2 weeks of November, that's where all the flying's at. So same thing with December. So it's like I'm bidding high credit, so I'm getting more hours of flying, but it's all getting clumped into these periods. So it's like I'll have a week off and then I'm essentially gone for 2 weeks.
Wow.
um, you know, and so like for example, I got a trip coming up. It's the 19th. So I got a trip the 22nd through the 24th. I get back at like I think 11 p.m. and then I'm out the next day on Christmas Day at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So I'm just gonna get a hotel down in Denver because it's a 2 hour drive home. So it's like I'm just gonna stay in Denver. So I'm not gonna be home for 5, 6 days by the time it's all done.
Wow.
And it's just yeah, and, it's just how it works, and so it's tiring. We Connor and I were talking about this before, and, I come from the 135/91 private corporate world, where Connor is now, and it's like, back then, I used to be on the road when I was a contractor. I was a full-time contractor the last year I was on the Phenom, and I was on the road a lot. Like, I for example, in 2023 from January 1st to May 5th, I think I spent 8 nights in my own bed. Um, yeah, and
Dadgum. And yeah, you're not
but
lying.
but but I never felt as tired as I do at the airlines, and it's because at the airlines, you're flying a lot. You're on the road all day. You're in the airplane because it's not like in the corporate world where you just do, you'll do 1 or 2 legs a day. In the airline world, if you're working long days, you're you're in the airplane for 10 to 12 hours, you know? Well, let me say 8 to 10 hours, because it's like you get in and then you do a turn. Well, you don't leave the airplane, you go out and do your walk around. Maybe you go up into the terminal to find coffee or some food, and then you're right back out. You're doing your pre-flight again, and you're pushing and you're going. And so you're in the air all day getting dried out. And so, those things all compound on you. So it's tiring. It's tiring working a lot, and but I don't want to complain too much because I'm grateful that I'm here, and that I've got a good job, and I'm able to afford a house because of it, and um that I get treated better at my airline than I ever did in any corporate job. So that's the trade off for me.
So with all this flying that you've been doing, have you is there like a favorite city, couple cities that you, whenever they pop up on your schedule, you're like, thank goodness I'm going there, versus, oh crap, I got to go down to God knows where. Is there a couple like, cities that you like with good hotels, good food? What's your cup of tea down there?
Well, so it's funny because that's the difference. Like in so this is something I was just having this conversation with somebody I was flying with. So in the corporate world, you generally you'll pick your own hotels,
Right.
or you're at least staying at Marriott, Hilton, and you're not booking through third-party services. Airlines generally book through a third-party service, so you're not, like, direct booking, so you don't get all the benefits of, like, being a Bonvoy member or a Hilton Honors member. Um,
Yeah.
so in the airline world, since it's third party, they don't treat you as well at the hotels as they do if you just booked it through Marriott or something like that. Even if you have status, I still have my Marriott status, and a lot of them don't honor it because they're like, "Well, you didn't book through us, you booked through this other thing." So I I pick, in our system, there's certain hotels that are really good. And so when I bid my trips, I bid based off of where the overnight's at, mostly for the hotels so that I know I'm gonna get a good night's rest and they're gonna treat us decently, and there's good food nearby or it's quiet. And there's hotels we know that are terrible in our system, and for whatever reason, we can't get them changed. And so I bid avoid those trips. So as for destination wise, I like West Coast. Anything West Coast. It's just way more relaxing to me. I'm from the West Coast, so that helps. But still, it's like West Coast flying. You talk to any pilot. West Coast flying is so much more laid back than East Coast flying. It really is. So for me, I bid a lot of like San Diego, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland stuff because it's easy to get in and out of those airports. It's just you know,
Yeah.
out west, the people are just a lot more chill. I just had an overnight in JFK a few days ago, and that was the first overnight I'd had at the airline at JFK. And our hotel was they put us on a hotel in Long Island, so it's
It's
about
a
a
long way.
30-minute yeah, it's about a 30-minute van ride with no traffic.
Yeah.
So we got in at 1 o'clock in the morning. So going to the hotel is great, right? No traffic. It was awesome. Next day coming back, dude, just bumper to bumper the whole way. I can't imagine, like, I moved to the middle of nowhere in Wyoming to get away from people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you live like that? Just all day, every day. That is it.
It's so funny you
Bumper to
mentioned
bumper
that.
traffic.
I was just in Teterboro about a week ago, and we're flying in. Teterboro's obviously New Jersey, a couple miles from the Hudson River, and I'm like, hey, I got a couple days here. I'm gonna go, down to Rockefeller Center. I'm gonna go walk around Times Square. So I get an Uber, and I'm on my phone. I grab the Uber, and it says, your trip's 7 miles, but it's gonna take you 51 minutes to get there. And I'm like, that can't be right. And I'm a Texas guy, I don't go to New York all that often. And even whenever I do, I don't really go out. I'm like, I'm gonna go
Yep.
out and have a good time.
Yeah.
And I got about halfway down there, and I'm like, I have made a mistake. And I'm
Terrible
like,
mistake.
not only am I not there, but I still got to come back.
That's right.
And so
Uh,
I was down there, and I spent, it's 23 degrees out there. I'm all bundled up,
yep.
doing all the New York stuff, all that sort of who shot John. And then I'm like, well, I guess I got to go ahead and start thinking about coming back an hour back. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm good on that, man, for a while. But no, it's funny because you mentioned, West Coast flying. And, whenever I got hired, I was at my previous company. I had the option to pick between a base in Fort Lauderdale or Las Vegas. I'm like, I've flown all over the East Coast. I want to try out this West Coast flying a little bit. So I picked Las Vegas. And man, I loved it out there. It's pretty good weather most of the time,
Yeah.
pretty warm. And I'm like, man, I would much rather deal with these guys out and in on the West Coast and the East Coast. Everybody up in the East Coast kind of has an attitude. Everybody
Yeah.
in the West Coast, they're a little bit more laid back. Like I'm sure people are listening to this. You'll go find LAX and they'll clear you for the approach like 100 miles out, and you're
Yeah.
like,
Into
man,
LA.
this
Yeah.
would never happen at
No.
LaGuardia.
No.
And
No way.
I just don't need to. I just got to keep this same speed, do what they tell me to, and I'm not going to get yelled at. And
Yeah.
you go up to the Northeast, and you got to deal with all the icing, all the de-icing process. This time of the year in California, it's nice. We'd be wearing cutoffs Christmas weathers, because I mean, it's nice weather out there. So now that you've been at your airline for around 3 years and you really, got your feet set, I was curious to see, if you've kind of developed some spots that you bid and spots you don't
Yeah.
bid. Sounds like you have.
Yeah, yeah, and all my friends are still in Utah, so whenever, Salt Lake overnights kind of fit into my schedule, I tend to bid those because then it's kinda
Right.
nice to get to be at work while you're seeing your friends. It kinda makes the whole trip less it breaks the trip up. It makes it
Yeah.
feel like you're at work, not the whole time. Whenever I get to see my friends on overnights, that really helps for us on the road a
Sure.
lot. It really does. But yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about the airline, man, is like if you need to make money, like John's been working his ass off this year. He was crediting like over 100 hours a month for 6 months just to save up for his house, right?
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, he's working
Getting
like a
paid
dog.
though.
And oh yeah, he was. And he just put a huge down payment on his house, and he's going to be in a real good position because of it. But then there's a lot of guys I know who work min credit. They'll drop down to minimum credit and they'll work 8 to 10 days a month because that's all they're required to do. And I'm looking forward to being able to do that financially here, not hopefully not too distant future, because that's why you go to the airlines, make good money and work less and uh, have more free time. So yeah, man, it's got its ups and downs. In the corporate world, you didn't have that. It was like 8 on, 6 off, 7 on, 7 off, right? Um,
Right.
you have the unicorn job, so that helps a lot. You know your schedule, you know when your days off are, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. I'll twist the knife a little bit. Tomorrow we're going to a college football playoff game on Saturday, and then we'll get back later, and then leaving on December the 26th to go spend about 5 days up in Eagle Vale, Colorado. I'm thinking about maybe either doing the snowmobiling or getting a couple day lift ticket and doing some skiing up there.
Nice.
Now, here's the other thing you got to think about. People that are listening to this, do you want to go corporate? Do you want to go airline? There's no right or wrong decision. I know guys that have left corporate to go to airline, and I know guys that have left airline to go corporate. People will say they've never heard of that. I have. I have a buddy that just did that.
Oh, yeah, we have
Now,
a couple guys that just left for the corporate world.
yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
it's you gotta go out there and try it, but, whenever you're taking these private jets or, you're doing a 91 trip into, say, Eagle for during the dead of winter,
Mhm.
unlike the airline, whenever airline pilots, they'll park the airplane, set the brakes, shut everything down, and they go walk off. There's a pretty long process whenever you're the one that's you're the flight on the corporate, you're the flight attendant, you're the pilot. So as soon as you get the passengers off, you have to go and purge the system. You have to take all the freezables off the airplane so
Yeah.
they don't freeze in the airplane. Because think about it, you're leaving an airplane out in 15-degree weather for 3 days. It's just like your house. If you don't leave
Mhm.
your faucets dripping, you're going to bust a pipe. So that's another, maybe hour and a half, 2 hours of just prep work that you have to do to leave the airplane. So you leave the airplane, then you got to show up whenever on go home day, a couple hours before to not only, make sure everything is fine with the aircraft, you got to put water back on the airplane. You have to restock all the sodas. You have to get the ice. You have to make the coffee. You have to make the tea. You have to get the papers. You have to go to the Walmart and you have to buy the snacks. I
You have to
mean, so
shop.
you have
Yeah.
to go shop and it's a project to get it going. It's a project to shut the airplane down. It's a project to bring the airplane online. But if you're serious about it and you love it, it's just part of the job. There's some guys that'll cuss and moan about it, but you know, if you just look at it as part of the job, it's just part of it's the life we live. You have a lot better time about it. I've been with guys that are, they're just miserable. And I'm like, if you just look at it through just a little bit of a different lens, you mentioned it. I don't want to complain too much. How lucky are we, right?
Right.
Just, remember that. Hey, we're professional pilots. It's pretty damn cool. Just like you go find any job, there's going to find parts that maybe you don't like as much.
Sure.
And I mean, if you want to be mad in this job, you can find plenty of reasons to be mad. But if you just look at it from a good lens, your life will be so much more enjoyable. So I don't know if anybody's even listening this far in the podcast, but if you're thinking about which one you want to go do first, just say you want to go to a major airline or say you want to go to a regional airline in a 135 or Part 91 company, corporate calls you first. Hey, if from my experience, you take the job that calls you first.
Amen.
It's a lot harder to find a job whenever you don't have one versus finding a job whenever you do have.
Exactly. It really is. Yeah, dude, I agree. I appreciate you highlighting those differences. They both have their ups and downs, and pilots, we are experts at complaining about everything. That's what we
Sure
do.
thing. Yeah.
It's a bet, it's part of flight school. Apparently, I guess I missed that day, but it's
Telling you what, dude, I have a friend, my brother's friend. He's going through pilot school right now, and he's going through his instrument phase. And I get a call from him the other day. He's like, "Hey, man, I need some help." I'm like, "Well, what's going on, man? He's like, "Hit me." He's like, "Dude, I've been trying to learn how to read these Jeppesen charts, and I just
Mm,
can't do it." So I
okay.
sat down with them, for about 30 minutes on
Hmm.
FaceTime, and I say, "Hey, this is how I was taught to read a plate." And
Right.
then he'll be asking me, "Hey, what is this down here? What's this little symbol?" And I'm like, "Hell, man, I don't know." I was like, "You're never gonna know everything about
Right,
this
right.
industry, so it's okay to ask questions." And I was like, it's probably you probably need to know that. So we went down found an IFR legend, and I'm
There you
like,
go.
it's this, that, and the other. And I made a PDF and sent it to him. And I'm like, hey, whenever you go to your IFR check ride, you know how these DPEs are. They're gonna
Hmm.
try and get you here and get you here. I'm like, print this thing out, laminate it, have it right there. And anytime he asks you about any, miscellaneous thing on the plate, just have it printed out and say, well, it's kind of uncommon. I don't, I'm going for my IFR certification right now. I don't know everything about it, but what I do know is I know how to find it, and it's right here.
Right.
So that's kind of a
Uh,
one-off, but
well,
you're always learning in this industry.
yeah, absolutely. Being prepared is that's a biggest part of a check ride, showing that you're prepared because you don't know everything. We don't know everything. I mean, that's the great thing about the guys I fly with at my airline, that 99% of the people I fly with at an airline are like, "Man, I don't know everything. I make mistakes. If I make a mistake, tell me. Let me know I'm making a mistake." Because a lot of a lot of the older guys, their brief is something along the lines of, "I've been here a long time. If you see me doing something, it's not technique. It's not that I think I'm better than everybody. I'm messing up, and I need you to tell me that." They're
Yeah,
humble, right? And I've noticed that, with more experience, we generally become more humble because you realize, you don't know what you don't know. There's nothing wrong with referencing your paperwork or your legends or your charts to get answers. I mean, nobody expects you to know everything. They want you to know where to find the information. That's the big
yeah,
one. So I think the DP would be more impressed that he was prepared with a legend of, "Oh, I know exactly where to find that information. Boom."
right.
Example on my instrument, check ride, it was so during my whole IFR training, ForeFlight had just kinda come out, that's how old I am, and my flight school, they wouldn't let me use the iPad in ForeFlight during training.
Really?
They wanted me to use plates because they didn't want me, like, relying on the moving map or anything. So they wanted me to use paper plates. So that's what I learned on, right? And then like a week before my check ride, they're like, "All right, you've proven you know how to use the plates and you're not relying on the map and everything. So we'll let you start using it so that when you go on your check ride, you can use your EFB." Okay, great. And so on my check ride, I had my EFB, but then I had all the charts or all the plates for the approaches printed out as a backup, and this was early iPads, and so we were on the VOR approach, and my iPad overheated on my kneeboard, and I got
No
the big
kidding.
triangle that said "overheated," and I'm like, "Oh, crap," and the DP was like, "What?" I'm like, "My iPad overheated," and she's like, "Oh, no," and so I immediately pulled out my paper plates, flipped open to the approach, kept it going,
Wow.
and she was so impressed by that.
That is
She was
that
like,
story needs
"Yeah,
to be told a lot more. That's
yeah."
right there is that's why we do what we do.
Right. Well, for example, we have roles in the airline world, and when I flew corporate, like even in the 135 world, we always had a spare iPad
Yeah.
available that we would check in the corporate world. Now in the 135 sorry, in the airline world, we are required to have 2 on board. So each pilot has to have one in case one of them fails.
Right.
And if one of them fails, then the other guy takes over and his is primary. But there's
Yeah.
always at least 2 in the cockpit just in case. And in the corporate world, most because if you're a single pilot, you have to have the spare. And then
Right.
even when I flew jets and was 2 crew, we still kept this a backup in we had like a special folder with all the backup info, and we kept a spare iPad in there that we kept up to date just in case one of ours failed, right? So redundancy, hopefully for people in flight school, if you're in training or instrument training right now, get backup charts. Because 99, and especially in a small airplane, Piston 172, Diamond Star, something like that, you know where you're going, you know which plates you're going to shoot.
Yeah.
So just print them out. You can
Yeah.
go on, was it AirNav or whatever, and print out the free national plates.
They're right
You
there for
know,
you, man. They're right
exactly.
there for you.
Because
And
yippies
even
fail.
and even if you don't use them, and you don't want to be you don't want to be the guy that his iPad overheats during a check ride,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden you don't have any backup charts. Then that's that's a failed ride.
Yeah, you're gonna fail. Yeah,
You're gonna fail.
yeah,
And whenever I was flying 135 medevac, we had the backup iPad that stayed in the aircraft, and there was always two. And we were doing single
yeah.
pilot operations,
Right.
and yeah, I mean you always make sure that it's fully charged and updated because crazy things happen, man, up in the air and in airplanes. You need to be as prepared as you possibly can be for it. Whatever, whenever do your pre-flight, whenever you're going from A to B, you do need to know what that symbol is on the chart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's this whole pre-flight thing that we discussed a couple episodes ago is do a proper pre-flight. If you know you're going to Sarasota, Florida, you need to know everything. You need to be doing your homework a couple days before, knowing
Hmm.
exactly what's going on that approach, knowing what runways are closed, knowing what taxiways are closed. Get this, I was landing at a really small airport in the Gulfstream, our 550, and there was a NOTAM that they didn't have any fuel there. So we're like, okay, that's fine. We'll tanker. It's not very far. A
Right.
Comanche comes in, he pulls up to the pump and goes to the line guy, says, "Hey, I need to top it off." And he's like, "We don't have any we don't have any fuel." He's like, "What do you mean you don't have any fuel?" He's like, "Well, did you read the NOTAMs? NOTAMs are notices to airmen if people are listening." And he's like, "Well, no." He's like, "Well, if you'd have read the NOTAMs and you'd have known we didn't have fuel." He didn't have any fuel. He had to call somebody and he had to bring fuel from a third party and just limp it over to the
Bucket
next
on the side
airport
of
to
the
get
road called
fuel.
AAA.
It's like you don't want to be that guy, man.
Yeah,
You see some crazy stuff, man, on these FBOs and just around airports in the airplane. You just can
no,
never be overly prepared, man.
and in the defense of pilots, like, I mean, the last administration, the FAA said that the NTSB said the NOTAMs are a pile of garbage, and they still haven't fixed them. you know?
Yeah,
And pilots miss NOTAMs all the time because they're buried in this garbage. Now, programs like ForeFlight, they break them down to make it really easy to read and
right,
searchable and stuff. But I mean, still, like it is a known problem, and there's a million NOTAMs if you go to a Class Bravo airport. Good luck finding that one in the
right.
pile of garbage.
Because
It
you
really,
would think if a runway is closed, that would be the first one. No, that might be
it's
five
not how it works.
pages deep, right in the middle.
Yeah,
And and to your point, the NOTAMs are broken. Yeah, they are. Thank goodness for ForeFlight because it has all. They really do categorize them pretty well. But if you're using paper, man, good luck.
yeah, you're just reading. Yeah, it's just a pile of letters. You
Yeah,
don't, you can't decipher it because there's no real differentiation between them. So, yeah, man.
yeah. No,
So,
we beat that one to death, man.
yeah.
But
Well, everybody, thanks for listening. We want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and a Happy Hanukkah. And if there's any other holidays that I didn't hit, I apologize. We wish you a happy that too.
yep,
Happy Festivus for the rest of us. So,
exactly.
that there you go. So thanks again for coming on, Connor. And We really appreciate everybody listening this year. It's been really fun getting the podcast going, and we got more to come next year. We got a bunch of great things lined up starting in January. Catch us on the social medias, X, Instagram, TikTok. We got our website, email, everything, and we'll talk to you guys soon. See ya.
See ya.